and welcome to the Deer IQ podcast, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and we're in episode 2 of year 2 in our first series, Summer Prep for Fall Success. In this episode, we'll continue to look at how to achieve our goal, or theme of this year, to consistently take the top deer where you hunt, and exact habits and systems needed to do that. I'm joined by my friend Mark for this conversation on a couple of foundational systems to help with that task. And yes, we have our free journal that you can download to help with that. That's below, and that will really help you out. So here are the top things to look for during this episode. What is our defined difference between going with your gut and a strategic hunt? And why, in my opinion, does this matter so much if you want more consistent success? What are the details of a scent control regimen that actually works, and what is the key way you have to implement it to be effective? What did I learn about hunter sounds at the University of Toledo test facility, and how does this translate into a practical hunting application? And as usual, there's a lot more in there, so let's get to the podcast and up your deer IQ. All right, welcome to the podcast here. I'm joined by my friend Mark. Mark, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. I'm really excited about joining you for the season. I think there's a lot of great things to talk about, and I'm pretty pumped. Yeah,
so we're kind of doing a little different format change here to try something different that's a little more conversational, right? So that's what we're going to look at and do today here. Before we get into what we're doing today, Mark's a friend of mine. We've hunted together for a while. You probably know him if you watch any of the videos. He's like all my B-roll shots or even photos, because he's like the only guy that will, for a steak or something, come and let me take videos of him doing weird hunting stuff. So you might know him from that. But before we get into talking hunting stuff, tell us a little bit more about you. So I guess people just know your background as a hunter and just in general.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we go back probably 10 years plus. Been hunting together more like the past 4 or 5. I've been hunting for, a long time, kind of grew up hunting, but one thing that I learned kind of in college was I did not know a lot at all, and realized that I was just really out of touch with understanding deer, understanding how different people hunted. I come more from a private land, so hunting to me was just, going out, sit in the same stand. And the past, 15 years probably has just been trying to challenge myself, trying to learn new things. And I kind of consider myself average mark hunter. I think I can probably relate to a large portion of, the hunting population, that I'm very realistic about goals. I'm not a massive buck chaser, but who doesn't like antlers? I'd love to shoot big deer, but I've got kids. I know I don't have a ton of time to spend. I don't have a ton of money to spend, but I also want to get better. And I feel like I've kind of maybe been plateaued the past couple of years, and I want to challenge myself. And I don't know, what else can I say, man?
No, that's good. That's good. So Mark's I'm kind of going to turn this over to Mark, and we're just going to have a kind of a chat about some stuff here. But the last episode we had, we kind of talked about some different things related to goals and goal setting, and I kind of left it hanging with a challenge for everybody. And we'll kind of, I guess, get into that right now. But so I'll just turn it over to you, Mark, and we'll kind of go from there and see what we get here.
Yeah, well, the one good thing is I'm not an expert. I don't consider myself an expert, but I'm really analytical. I like thinking stuff through. I love visualizing. So what you started here really relates to me. And I've always been good about asking really pointed questions. And so, even challenging you as you've kind of bounced some ideas around. I just love digging in and trying to figure stuff out and kind of laying a framework and a plan for that. Cause it's easy to say I want to get better. I want to be a better hunter. I want to kill nicer deer. How do you actually systematically take steps to do that? And that's what we're talking about, and that's what really gets me excited.
Yeah, really going from pipe dreams really to how does this actually work? Like, how do guys actually do this? And the theme for this year is, how to consistently take the top deer where I hunt. And it's very possible, but not if you're just guessing at it, right? A lot of guys, it's like every 10 years or so, they might happen into one, but, So, yeah.
That's me,
so
man.
hopefully this does help guys out. So
we actually really haven't talked about this a whole lot, but I mean, if we're starting from a foundation of like, what are your goals for the season? And then just what changed from last year? Do you have gear system changes? Do you have any like goal changes in terms of, how you want to hunt, deer you want to hunt, anything like that?
Yeah, for me, I mentioned this in the last podcast, it hasn't changed a ton. I'll just, I guess, point this out. Like I think criteria is different than a goal. And so what I mean by that is, and I probably didn't say this very well in the last podcast, but for me, criteria is kind of when I will or will not shoot something, like a size or age or whatever.
Like go, no go, pass.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And a lot of guys make that their goal. Like for me, that's more of a criteria. The goal is, I think, more of just a practical thing of, again, how you get there, right? So these are habits you want to implement. These are systems you want to implement, and you can measure yourself actually doing those. So for me, like I said, last year was just, I made some poor shots. So I've looking at systems to help with that, my shot prep system. And so that's just a thing I'm doing, which will lead me to hopefully the end result of more consistent success on the top deer. And so if you start doing these practices, these things, you'll get there, and the result will kind of just happen type thing.
And you've already you already have that system that you've established with shot prep, right? Like you've already been checking that box in terms of doing it and practicing it. Even we did a shoot a week or two ago, and you were implementing that new system already.
Yeah, it's a mental thing, it's a physical thing, and all that. Let's get into. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say. So you also mentioned hunting less.
Yeah.
Kind of the last episode is where you left off. So.
Yeah, so that gets to this idea, just to recap. So the idea of going with your gut versus a strategic strike, right, which would be the hunt. And a lot of times it's very easy, and I used to do this a lot, where you don't know why you're hunting, where you're hunting. You just feel like, I want to go here, or I feel like this is the spot to go. But you can't really verbalize and say why. And so the point that you want to get to...
I've never done that.
Yeah, I did it a ton. And so I always had these wasted hunts, right? And so nowadays, the best place to get is when you go out and you feel really confident that you're going to get a chance at something. And it doesn't always happen, but every 1 to 2 hunts, if you're doing this right, you will get a chance at something. And so it's getting those systems in place, and this is what we're talking about, going through this pyramid here, basically. And number one, the base, the foundation is just these core things, these foundational systems. And one of them is shot prep system, which is what I need to work on, right? And there's some other things, but that'll get you to this point where you can make more strategic, high odds strikes. So it's just kind of going through that. And so another thing to talk about now is a couple of those, I guess, systems in there that are really important. And we'll start with scent control. And some people are totally for it. Some people are totally against it. There's a lot of debate.
A lot of opinions.
Yeah, there's a lot about it. But so I'll just talk about that some, because that's I guess something I can look at my own personal experience with and see if I made results or not, right? So some of the things I see out there are opinions based on other people's opinions, right? You can do this, you can't do that, whatever. But it's more about like actually experiencing something. So when I was first starting hunting, I'm 12 years old. I'm going out hunting, because that's when we could in Michigan. When you turned 12, you could bow hunt. And I was terrible, obviously. I was 12 years old. Every single time a deer got downwind of me, it reacted, right? It'd snort, stomp, flag, run off. And for the first 19 years of hunting, like that was what happened, right? And so when you look at stuff like this, systems, whatever they are, you can really collect data, real-time data in the field. And you can't 100%, say, oh, it's because of this, that, or the other, but you start getting a really good picture of what's going on and what works and doesn't. And that was my experience the first 19 years.
Like for instance being, I took an extra 2 steps in my scent control regimen, and I had a couple deer downwind where normally you would have been used to maybe having them react, and now they're not, or they're staying more calm or whatever.
Yeah, and so you can measure that reaction or not. You can't always guarantee that they, were in your scent cone or plume or whatever, but if you have hundreds of data points, it starts showing a picture if there's differences, right? And so for my first 19 years, I'd use 0 scent control. And I have hundreds of data points that, because I knew every time a deer got downwind, they were going to snort or blow out, right? And then I started hearing stuff randomly here and there about, you can do this or that, this scent control stuff, right? And so I was like, I'll try it, right? And it really first started, and this would be where anybody probably should start if you haven't done anything, is just like washing your clothes better, like actually washing your clothes, putting it in garbage bags, because, garbage bags, if you think about it, they keep stink out or contained in really well, right? That's what they're designed to do. So if you wash your stuff, put it in there, it's going to keep stink out, right? And so I just started doing that, and immediately I started noticing some differences. I was like, these deer are going to wind me. They're getting downwind. And then they didn't. And I was like, that's odd. And so for the last 13, 14 years or so, I've developed, more and more of this system because I started seeing changes and differences, right? And you start collecting data, after you start implementing something, and you can just compare those two. Right. And so for the last 13, 14 years, I've, changed this and that and gotten it to the point that if I implement this system, and we can get into that here, I won't get smelled. I won't get smelled by deer. So it's a drastic difference. But this is something that anybody can do. Don't take my word for it. Actually just do it and see the results. Right. But you've got to do it really meticulously. Because it only takes one little thing, right? Whether it be anything you do, if a deer detects you, it's over, right? And so you have to be super meticulous about it, which is, I think, probably the biggest barrier to a lot of people is that it's easy to get lazy, right? You just, I don't want to do that. This is good enough, right?
I feel like you're talking right to me here, Adam.
But that's the hardest part of it.
And the reality is because I think you've actually directly challenged me too on some of the stuff where why aren't you doing this? And it's kind of well, do I really need to? But scent control and managing some of that is, if you think about all the variables that happen in hunting, you at least have control over that, right? And so, everybody's got a budget. To go to the nth degree, it's there's definitely time involved. There's a little bit of money, but it's not really that expensive. But for something that's completely in your control to manage, it's not that, it's an easy block to add here, right, and know that it's taken care of. Right? It's
more work than money type thing. It's work and time. And so start with the bags, right? Start with washing your stuff. Preseason prep, right? You're just wiping down everything, all your gear. If you can't wash it, you should wipe it down, right? So to get all scent off it. Even backpacks, all the stuff. Backpack, your saddle, all your clothes, obviously. Also, part of that is your underlayers, which is where most of your stink is accumulating, right? Is the first layer. Is just having multiple layers of those. So every hunt, that is completely fresh, right? And so let's say you have 5 underlayers, 5 shirts. All right, you have a new one each one, and you put it in the hamper and you're washing it, right? So you just keep this cycle going of fresh gear every single time you go out. Anything you can wash it every single time. Again, that's work, right? And then you put it in the bags, right? And so when you go out that this stuff is free of human scent, right? Bigger things, I use ozone. I have an ozone generator, and there's tons of those to buy. I'm not sure how all of them work, honestly, because I have a huge industrial one that's like way cheaper than most, but it like pumps out a lot of ozone, and that will sterilize anything, right? So the big jackets and things you aren't going to wash all the time. So every hunt after, I'm just ozoning that stuff, right? And so again, it's just a system, this habit you get into, and pretty soon you're just kind of doing it. You're kind of used to it, right?
And that you just put that in a box, don't you? Pipe it in like a tote or something like that.
Right.
So you just stuff your gear in there, turn the thing on, and it's working. You shouldn't do it where you're going to breathe it. I mean, there's some major hazards there, but put it in the garage. I have a tote, something like that. Just stick it in there for 10 minutes, right? And then you put it in bags, and you're good to go, right? So that's part of the just meticulous part of the system. Then there's the whole your vehicle thing and, keeping that clean. Also think about your, just your normal clothes, right? Your sheets, your, dryer sheets, or not using, scented ones of those, trying not to mix stuff in your washer. Like I wash everything in non-scented. And even like your sheets on your bed and your blankets and stuff like that, like all those should be, if you can, you probably have to argue with your wife, but you don't want lingering, mountain meadow.
Right. Because if you take a shower, okay, so I'm using scent-free soap too. If you take a shower and then you get in sheets that smell like ocean breezes, that's on you now, right? Even if you don't smell it, you're contaminating yourself. So you're trying to eliminate those things, sources in your truck, not eating smelly stuff or having smelly drinks in your truck. Like greasy stuff's really bad because it just like lingers. And
I think sugary stuff too, I've heard.
Yeah, and avoiding any of that stuff. You just have to look at all the details, right? But if you can do that and do it systematically and keep doing it, like you'll see results. But you got to implement it. So that's a huge one.
So going back to the truck really quick, do you actually like clean, or do you like? I know they even have like little ozone like plugins now.
Yeah. That could work. I'm not sure specifically how those work. I will take my big ozone generator and just stick it in there every week or so, and then just try to keep your.
But it's more about just managing the bad, bad smells out kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. And then your street clothes. Here's another big part: is to never put on your hunting clothes until you're like walking out to hunt. So you never wear them in your truck. You never wear them anywhere else. They go out of the bag at your tailgate or wherever you're dressing, and you put them on and you go hunt. And when you come back, you take them all off and put them back in a bag that you now need to treat, right, or wash or whatever depending on what it is, but you need to treat that now. And then you get back in with your street clothes in your truck. So you're keeping these layers of protection between you and potential contamination the best you can. Okay, so here is your high IQ moment. So summer scouting is here, and many people are putting out trail cameras to gather key bits of intel to help drive smart hunting decisions. That's great, but trail cameras can actually be a detriment if not used correctly. A major mistake to watch out for is what I call reverse surveillance, where deer actually start finding out about us rather than us gather intel on them. And this is bad. This happens due to a wide variety of factors, usually due to checking them too often, hanging them improperly, and leaving scent. So here's some tips. First, don't visit them too often, and make sure they're in non-intrusive locations like field edges. Hang them head high so deer can't pick them out visually, and use gloves and rubber hip boots to keep scent to a minimum. Also, try to put them on a 45-degree angle to where deer are traveling and toward the far end of the effective range of the camera. These things will help keep deer from seeing, smelling, and being aware of your surveillance. and not make deer change behavior before you can get a strategic strike hunt. Okay, and now let's get back to the podcast. So there's a lot of big parts to it. Even your diet is a huge one, right? You don't want to be farting on stand. You don't want to be, stinking it up.
Drinking coffee in the stand.
Yeah, whatever messes you up, like onions. Like if you eat a bunch of onions, it literally comes out of your skin, right? The garlic, curry is super bad, right? Like you'll just smell like it, right? It's coming out of you. So eliminating that stuff in your diet is huge. And these are sacrifices, right, to have a better chance. But I'll give a story on that, and then we can move on to another one, or you can ask some more questions. But so last year I shot a buck here in Michigan, public land buck, and I texted you after I shot it, and you're like, I can't believe you shot that, if you remember that. But
I think I do that a lot for the huge monster bucks that you kill.
But that was it had to be a very strategic hunt. Like it was a very hard spot to hunt. I knew about several bucks in that area, but it was just super hard to hunt it and get in and out. So I was really strategic about when I went in. I thought the time was right. I had daylight pictures, or real close to daylight pictures of this buck hitting a scrape. And I was like, it's kind of now or never, especially on public land. Someone could just show up at any moment, right? So I went in there. The first hunt, saw him, didn't get a shot at him, was able to get out. The second hunt, I go in there, and there was at least a dozen deer around me, downwind of me during that hunt. Specifically, there was a group of does at one point downwind of me. And at any point, people need to realize if one deer gets triggered, it's like a cascade, right? It's a domino effect. And they're telling everything else, and the big bucks to come out last are not going to come out, right? So you have to get past every single deer. And the more deer you have around you, the harder that is, and the more chance you have to start that domino effect. And so that's why stuff like scent control, these little things, are super important, because you can't trigger any of that to start any of the deer. And so I had these deer downwind of me, these does, and they were, sometimes they'll kind of like think, you can tell they're thinking, oh, there's something going on here, but then they'll go back to normal, and you've gotten past their defenses at that point, because that they sensed a little something, but it wasn't enough to trip the trigger. And I think that's a big point with stuff like scent control. It's not that you eliminate all your scent, it's that you just do it enough that they don't alert. And so that happened that night. These does were kind of like looking around. They maybe thought something was up, but then they went back to feeding, and they were fine. And then all these other bucks came out. And then right at dark, the bigger buck came out, and they started working toward the scrape, and he had a smaller satellite buck with him that came right to the scrape. I mean, he was 8 yards downwind of me and did not react at all. And the big buck was hanging back, waiting basically to see what that buck would do. He was basically using him as bait. And when he saw he didn't react, then he felt safe to come in, and that's when I got my shot, right? And so I'd get past a ton of deer and many deer were downwind of me during this hunt to get the actual shot. And a lot of people maybe don't realize that it's not just fooling one deer. Like you've got to fool potentially a lot of deer depending on where you hunt and the deer density is there. So that's just something to help. I mean,
well, and my anecdote, and this is why I'm going to take it a lot more seriously, actually, because I am kind of like, I do, 75%, but I'm lax on maybe that extra little, like, use the extra garbage bag, or don't fill gas and put them in the back of your truck, because I've had spills that lingered forever. I didn't get a chance at a really nice Michigan 8-point, like probably maybe the biggest deer I've ever shot, who was coming in and just caught the edge of my scent cone where I needed him to take, 3 to 5 more steps. And it wasn't a hard bust, but it was like there was just something there that was a little bit off. And so he just angled and, went away. And so that like margin even is like, man, just by doing a couple extra steps, me doing a couple extra steps might have given him a couple extra steps. And all of a sudden, that hunt's totally changed.
Yeah, it's just little things.
And you've got you have like a guide and everything. So there's some other resources, certainly about your regimen too, that I know, like you've sent me, I've read through, and I think anybody watching or listening can get as well.
Yep, you can download that. It'll be linked below. That's a freebie to read through. And, if you're going to use it, I say just try it for a year. Just collect data points.
It's not going to hurt.
Yeah, but you got to use it meticulous. You got to do everything. Because if you do, again, one thing wrong,
The other thing that you're pretty meticulous about is sound.
Yes, I am meticulous about sound. So there's about 7 things. I wrote an article years ago about this. I call it, sound control, 7 rules for, controlling your sound. And I think that's one that people overlook.
I mean, that's another foundational piece.
Yeah, we're still down here. We're still down here.
Just building these blocks of things that you can control to work for you and give you like great systems to kind of elevate your chances.
Right. And
we're all leading up to the hunt.
Getting up to, the strategic strike. So I'll talk about a couple of those real quick, but there's 7 of them that you should be doing. And a lot of guys really just do I'll slap some moleskin, this fuzzy stuff on my gear. And that's a start. And moleskin is okay. It doesn't work the best. Some sort of foam is better for sound absorption. But that's a start, right? Okay, so you soundproof some of your gear. But there's so much more to it than that. Years ago now, I went down to University of Toledo. There's a soundproof booth down there. I worked with a professor to test a bunch of different hunter sounds. And it was really interesting. We looked at the frequency range, how loud they were, and then you can predict, with equations, say this is how far this sound will travel under certain conditions, right? And so stuff like crunching leaves 400 to 500 yards under calm conditions. So the noise we make travels a long ways, right? And this is stuff that the deer recognize as not, shouldn't be in their environment, right? It's a predator sound, right? Clanging metal, like over 1,000 yards, right? And it was just interesting to see the actual physics of that, right? So a big thing is just eliminating any chance of making noise. Obviously you're going to soundproof your gear. So go through all your gear, your stands, all that stuff, and cover what you can. But a lot of the stuff that I do, you got to be real meticulous about that too, because think about, one thing. So a deer's coming in, is 20 yards away, and you're getting ready for the shot, and you just ting something accidentally because you didn't cover something that's metal, let's say, and that hunt's over, right? You spent months and months preparing for that, and then because you didn't do one little thing, you ruined your whole season, right? Maybe your whole life. But it's those little things, right? So,
and like if you got a nice deer coming in, you're not thinking about where specifically is my bow cam, right? You're your heart's pounding, you're locked on that deer, and it's really hard to concentrate on some of that other stuff.
Yeah, and I'll say this, we could talk about this forever, but we got to wrap up here. But the point is silence. Pick silence over convenience. There's a lot of things in your gear that are convenient, but if they add potential to make noise, I personally eliminate it. So even things like zippers, I'll take the zipper tab off because it's metal, and I'll just put a string through it, because that's something that can clang, right? Buckles, I recently this year got a new climbing harness, safety harness, because I hadn't been wearing one for years. I know that sounds terrible. I don't have kids at home, I'm taking risks, right? But I hated the things because they're all buckles and they're, chance to clang, and you can't really cover some of that up because you got to use it. So I found one this year that was free of most buckles, and then I taped the rest, right? So I'm not buckling, I'm stepping through because I've taped all the parts that buckle together. But just doing stuff like that and just going through all your gear and saying, if this could make noise, I'm either going to silence it or I'm just going to get rid of it. Like even like backpacks that have like those cheap plastic buckle things that you don't really need, just cut them off. Like if it's non-essential and it could make noise, just eliminate it. So really going through and again, having a system to just eliminate any chance of error or little noise, stuff like that.
And now's probably a great time to like start going through that and getting things ready. Like do it now before it's crunch time.
Right, absolutely. So, well, it was good chatting, Mark. We're going to wrap it up here. But so we have a few things for everybody. You can, the scent control guide, regimen, which is what I do. You can download that for free. Also check out, we have a new Deer IQ test. Mark took it. It's way more detailed, right? It's not for everybody. It's more for serious hunters. There is a price with it. The first one was free, but there's a price to it because it's valuable, right? And if you really want to know where your weakness is so you can set proper goals and actually improve, that's something that'll really help you. So you can check that out as well as everything else we got on our website. So
awesome. Great stuff.
Okay, so here are your high IQ takeaways and challenges. First, download our free scent control regimen below, and I challenge you to use it and objectively collect data when deer are downwind or where they would typically smell you. Do you notice a difference? Second, go through and eliminate gear you don't need based on the criteria of silence over convenience. And how many spots do you need to be able to hunt every time and have a great chance at a deer you want to shoot? How do you even figure that out? We'll talk about that transformational approach as we continue up the pyramid to consistent and highly effective hunting on the next episode. You won't want to miss it, and I'll see you then.